The knife went into the cake, and I realized my marriage was destroyed. Not because of the cake itself, a lopsided thing from Costco that Bernice hadn't even bothered to hide the plastic container for. Not because of the decorations, those sad dollar store streamers that looked like they'd been used for someone else's party first. It was the laughter, that particular kind of laughter that starts in the throat and ends in cruelty. "So I told him," Bernice was saying, her voice carrying across our living room to her book club friends. "I told Eugene, honey, at your age, twice a month is basically Olympic-level performance." She paused for effect, timing it like a comedian working a crowd. "He actually looked proud," the women shrieked. Margaret, who'd been our neighbor for 15 years, nearly spit out her wine. Linda, who I'd fixed her air conditioning for free last summer when it died during that heat wave, had tears running down her face. Patricia was laughing so hard she had to hold her stomach, and even quiet Jennifer, who usually just smiled politely at these things, was covering her mouth to keep from spraying her drink. I stood there, 50 years old, holding a paper plate with a slice of my own birthday cake, and felt something crack inside my chest. Not my heart. That would have been too poetic, too dramatic. Something else. Something that had been holding me upright for 25 years, keeping me functional, keeping me moving forward even when every instinct told me to stop. "Dad, you gonna eat that, or just stare at it?" Salvador, my oldest, clapped me on the shoulder hard enough to make me stumble forward a step. At 32, he still had my money in his pocket and disdain in his voice. "Mom's right, you know. You do zone out a lot. It's like you're not even here half the time." Franklin snickered from the couch, his eyes glazed from whatever he'd taken before showing up. My middle son, 30 years old and still acting like a teenager. Zoning out is Dad's special talent. That and fixing air conditioners for people who don't tip. Remember that time Mrs. Henderson gave him a can of diet soda as payment? Classic. "At least he shows up to work," Daman said. But there was no defense in it, no real support. My youngest, 26, said it like he was describing a dog that knew one trick. Like showing up to work was the absolute bare minimum of human achievement, and I'd somehow managed to meet that low bar. I looked around my living room, at my wife, holding court with her friends, her gym-toned body in a dress I'd paid for with overtime hours, laughing about our life like it was a comedy routine she'd workshopped. At my 3 sons, grown men, who still expected me to cover their rent, their car payments, their mistakes, their poor decisions, and bad investments. At Carmen, Bernice's sister, draped over Derek on my recliner that I'd saved up for 3 months to buy, his tattooed arms around her while they scrolled, through his phone, not even pretending to care about my birthday. Derek lived in my house, ate my food, used my electricity, my water, my internet. I'd never invited him. He'd just appeared one day 6 months ago, attached to Carmen like a parasite with a motorcycle. And somehow, I was the asshole when I asked how long he'd be staying. Bernice had looked at me like I'd suggested drowning puppies. "He's family now, Eugene. Don't be cruel." "Eugene, honey, cut another piece for Linda," Bernice called out, not looking at me, still performing for her audience. "And make it smaller this time. She's watching her figure, unlike some people." The room laughed again. I set down my plate and walked to the kitchen. The knife was still on the counter, covered in chocolate frosting. I picked it up and washed it carefully, watching the water run brown in the sink, watching it swirl down the drain, like everything else in my life seemed to be doing. I could see them through the doorway, my family, the people I'd worked 60-hour weeks for, pulled overtime for every holiday and weekend, skipped lunches so I could save an extra $20 here and there. The people who knew exactly how much pressure was needed to keep me quiet, keep me useful, keep me invisible. They'd turned it into an art form over the years. The water kept running. I kept washing the knife, even though it was clean, even though the frosting had been gone for 30 seconds. My hands moved on autopilot, while my brain processed something it had been avoiding for years. You know what Eugene's problem is? Bernice's voice again, performing for her audience. I could hear the whine in her words now, that slight looseness that meant she was on her third glass. He's comfortable being uncomfortable. It's like he enjoys being walked on. My therapist says some people are just wired that way. They find their identity in being the victim. Some men are just like that, Margaret said, and I could hear her nodding, that knowing tone. My ex-husband was the same way. Just took it until one day he was just gone. Packed a bag, left a note, and we never heard from him again. 20 years later, I still don't know where he went. Eugene's not going anywhere, Bernice said, and there was absolute certainty in her voice. The kind of certainty that comes from 25 years of evidence. Where would he go? This is his whole life. We're his whole life. He doesn't have hobbies, doesn't have friends outside of work. Harold doesn't count. That's just two guys who fix air conditioners together. Without us, Eugene would just be nothing. I turned off the water, set the knife down gently on the counter. Where would I go? Nowhere. I wouldn't go anywhere. But they would. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to Bernice, listening to her snore, that soft whistle she made when she'd had too much wine, and made lists in my head, numbers mostly, figures I'd been avoiding for years because looking at them straight on meant admitting things I didn't want to admit, facing realities I'd been running from since my sons were in diapers. Salvador owed me $43,000. Investments in his real estate ventures that never quite materialized. The license, the training, the car down payment, the house flip that turned out to be a scam, the sure thing condo deal that fell through. Each time, he'd promised returns, promised I'd be proud of him, promised this was the one that would make it all worth it. Franklin, $68,000, though calling it a loan, was generous. Most of it had gone to paying off gambling debts at casinos from here to Louisiana, that DUI lawyer who got him off with probation, the credit card debt he'd racked up buying things he couldn't afford to impress people who didn't care. Every time he asked, he swore it was the last time. Every time I believed him because he was my son, and you're supposed to believe your sons. Daman was the cheapest at $22,000, but he was also the youngest. Give him time, and he'd probably catch up to his brothers. He had student loans I'd co-signed for when he couldn't get them on his own. A car payment I'd guaranteed. Rent money I'd loaned him when his marketing job didn't pay as much as he'd expected. Bernice's credit cards, the ones in my name that she swore she'd pay off herself. $31,000. Clothes, mostly. Gym memberships, dinners with the girls, that trip to Scottsdale last year for her friend's 50th birthday. Every month, I paid the minimums and watched the interest pile up while she swiped the cards for more. Carmen and Derek. 6 months of groceries, utilities, water, internet. That time Derek's motorcycle needed new tires and somehow that became my problem. Call it $4,000, being conservative, though I knew in my gut it was more like 6 or 7. $168,000, give or take. That's what my family had cost me beyond the normal expenses of life. That was the price of being invisible. I got up at 5 a.m., like always. Made coffee, like always. Bernice didn't wake up, like always. She'd stopped waking up with me years ago, said she needed her beauty sleep, needed her 8 hours, or she'd be exhausted all day. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and started transferring money. The joint accounts, all 3 of them, got emptied into my personal checking account. The one Bernice didn't have access to because I'd opened it for work expenses, and she'd never bothered to ask about it. Never questioned why I needed a separate account. Never wondered what I was doing with it. Trust, she called it. Indifference. I knew it was. $47,000, just sitting there. Money she didn't know we had because she'd never once asked to see our finances. She just spent and assumed I'd handle it, assumed the money would always be there because it always had been. I paid off my truck. Every last cent of that. Loan. Gone. Paid off my credit cards. Both of them. Moved the rest into a savings account at a different bank, one across town that Bernice had never been to. Set up the account with security questions only I would know the answers to, using my mother's real maiden name instead of the one we'd always used for security. At 6 a.m., I called my lawyer. Not the family lawyer, Bernice's golfing buddy who gave us a discount on our will and always took her side when we had questions. A real lawyer, one I'd found through searching online at 3 a.m, reading reviews from other men who'd been where I was. Richard Brennan, specialist in divorce and asset protection. His secretary said he didn't take calls this early. Said the office didn't open until 9. I said I'd pay double his hourly rate for an 8 a.m. appointment, and that got her attention. She said she'd call me back. She called back in 10 minutes. 8:30 a.m. His office. Bring all financial documents. I went to work at 7, like always. Harold was already in the shop, drinking gas station coffee and complaining about his back, like always. 58 years old and still climbing into attics, still crawling under houses. He looked up when I came in. "How was the party?" he asked. "Educational," I said. He waited for more, but I didn't give it to him. Just grabbed my work orders for the day and started loading my truck. Harold watched me, confused. Usually I'd tell him about it, complain a little, make jokes about getting old. Today I just worked. I took the service calls that nobody wanted. The crawlspace jobs where you knew you'd be face to face with spiders and possibly rats. The attic work in September heat that still felt like August. The ones where you knew you'd be covered in insulation and rat droppings and probably asbestos by the end of it. The jobs that paid the same, but cost you more in misery. I worked like a machine, barely stopping for water, moving from one call to the next, with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing this for 30 years. By 3 p.m., I'd completed 6 calls. Harold looked at me like I'd grown a second head when I came back to drop off paperwork. "You feeling all right, Jean? You're moving like you're 25 again." "Never better," I said. At 4 p.m. I knocked off early, first time in 8 years, and drove to the bank. I pulled out $10,000 in cash, hundreds mostly, some 50s. The teller, a young woman who couldn't have been more than 23, looked nervous when I asked for that much. "Is everything okay, sir? That's a lot of cash to carry." "I'm buying a boat," I said. She didn't believe me, but didn't ask questions, just counted out the money twice, had me sign forms, reminded me about keeping it secure. I walked out with $10,000 in a bank envelope, and for the first time in my life, I felt powerful. Not the money itself, though that helped, but the act of taking it, of saying this is mine and meaning it. The lawyer's office was downtown, the kind of place with real wood furniture and artwork that wasn't just mass-produced prints from Home Goods. Richard Brennan was 60, silver-haired, with the kind of eyes that had seen every variation of human awfulness and stopped being surprised around year 5 of his practice. "Tell me everything," he said, settling into his chair with a legal pad and pen, old school. I did. Every detail I could remember. The birthday party, the laughter, 25 years of being invisible. The money, all that money flowing out to people who never said thank you. My sons, their debts, their dependents. Carmen and Derek living in my house like they owned it. Bernice's credit cards, her friends, Her therapy sessions, where apparently I was the problem. I talked for 45 minutes straight while he took notes, stopping me occasionally to ask for clarification or specific amounts. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and tapped his pen against the pad. The good news is, Texas is a community property state, which means she's entitled to half of everything acquired during the marriage. The bad news is, that includes debts. And from what you're telling me, there are significant debts tied to your children and her sister. They're not marital debts, I said. Did you pay them from marital funds? Yes. Then they're marital debts. Now we can argue that these were gifts, not loans, which means they're not recoverable in the divorce. But if you have any documentation, any texts, emails, anything where these were framed as loans, where repayment was discussed or promised, we can pursue repayment. It won't affect the divorce settlement, but it'll give you leverage with your children. I pulled out my phone. I'd spent my lunch break downloading everything. Screenshots of texts where Salvador promised to pay me back next month, Dad. I swear, this deal is going to come through. Emails from Franklin outlining repayment schedules that never materialized, always with excuses about bad luck at the casino or unexpected expenses. Even a signed note from Damen, written on a bar napkin 3 years ago, promising to pay back $3,000 with interest. Richard smiled for the first time, and it changed his whole face. Made him look almost friendly. You've been planning this? No, I said. I've been surviving this. Now I'm ending it. He walked me through the process. File for divorce, serve papers, document everything, and I mean everything, he and Abbas. Every conversation, every expense, every interaction. Expect her to fight dirty because they always do when money's involved. Expect your kids to take her side because children almost always side with the parent who doesn't hold them accountable. Expect it to hurt because divorce always hurts, even when it's necessary, especially when it's necessary. One more thing, he said as I was leaving, standing up to shake my hand. Whatever you're planning, whatever revenge fantasy you've got playing in your head, don't. The courts don't care about affairs or betrayal or hurt feelings. They care about assets and debts. Win in court, not in the streets. Don't give her ammunition. I shook his hand. I'm not planning revenge. He looked at me for a long moment, and I could see he didn't believe me. That's what they all say. Then they slash tires or post things on Facebook or get into fistfights with the new boyfriend, and suddenly I'm defending them on contempt charges instead of finalizing their divorce. Be smart, Eugene. Be patient. Win the war, not the battle. I left his office with a folder full of forms to fill out and a court date 3 weeks away for the initial filing. I sat in my truck in the parking garage and looked at those forms. All those blank lines waiting to be filled with the story of my failed marriage. 25 years, reduced to paperwork. Bernice was in the kitchen when I got home, making herself a salad. Kale and quinoa and grilled chicken from a meal prep service that cost $40 a box. She'd been on a health kick for 6 months, ever since her trainer at the gym told her she needed more protein. The trainer was 28 and had the kind of muscles that came from spending 6 hours a day at the gym. His name was Brett, and Bernice mentioned him constantly. Carmen and Derek were on the couch, watching Netflix on the TV I'd bought last Christmas, when Bernice complained our old one wasn't big enough. 75 inches of screen showing some reality show about people yelling at each other. My sons weren't there. They had their own places, technically, even though they spent more time at our house eating our food than at their apartments. You're home late? Bernice said, not looking up from her phone where she was scrolling through Instagram. There's leftover chicken, if you want it, in the blue container. I think there's 3 pieces left. I need to talk to you, I said. Can it wait? I'm meeting the girls for wine in an hour. Linda's going through something with her husband and needs support. No. It can't wait. She looked up then, actually looked at me, and something in my face made her put down her phone. Behind her, I could hear Derek pause the TV, could feel the attention in the room shifting to us. "What's wrong?" she asked, and there was already defensiveness in her voice, already preparation for an argument she assumed she'd win. "I'm filing for divorce." The words just came out, flat, simple, clean. I'd planned a whole speech during the drive home, rehearsed it at stoplights, but in the end, those 4 words were enough. Bernice stared at me. Behind her, I could hear Derek say something to Carmen, soft and urgent. The apartment suddenly felt very small and very quiet. "What?" "I said I'm filing for divorce. I've already talked to a lawyer. You'll be served papers within the week. Probably Thursday." She laughed. Actually laughed, this nervous sound. That didn't match her face. "Is this about yesterday?" "Eugene, honey, we were just joking. You know we didn't mean anything by it. That's just how the girls and I talk. It's not serious. I've moved all the money from our joint accounts into my personal account. I've paid off my truck and my credit cards. I'm done subsidizing everyone else's life while being treated like I don't exist." The laughter stopped. Her face changed, went from confused to calculating in a second. "You can't do that. That's my money too. That's theft. It was our money, community property. Now it's moved to my account until the court decides how to divide it. Everything's legal. My lawyer already checked." Carmen appeared in the doorway, Derek behind her. Carmen looked worried, but Derek looked angry, his jaw tight. "What's going on?" "Your brother-in-law is having a midlife crisis," Bernice said, but her voice had an edge now, sharp and cutting. "Eugene, be serious. You're not getting a divorce. We've been married 25 years. You can't just throw that away because of a joke." "It's not about the joke. It's about 25 years of being invisible. For 25 years, I worked until the end, while everyone took, and no one said, thank you." "That's not fair." "Fair?" The word came out harder than I intended, and I saw her flinch. "You told your friends I was bad in bed, at my birthday party. You let our sons mock me in my own house for entertainment. You've spent $31,000 on credit cards in my name and never once asked if we could afford it. Your sister and her boyfriend have been living here for 6 months, eating my food, using my electricity, and not once has anyone said thank you. Not once." "We can talk about this," Bernice said, and now there was panic in her voice. Real panic, the kind that comes when you realize the ground is shifting under your feet. "Eugene, please, we can work this out. I'll talk to the girls, tell them they went too far. We'll set boundaries with Carmen and Derek. We'll go to counseling." "There's nothing to work out. I'm done. I've been done for years. I just finally admitted it." Derek stepped forward. He was bigger than me, younger, covered in tattoos of skulls and flames and other things meant to look intimidating. Prison tattoos, though he'd never been to prison. Just wanted to look like he had. "Hey man, maybe you should calm down. You're upsetting everyone." I looked at him. Really looked at him. 28 years old, no job beyond some vague talk about starting a business, living in my house, screwing my sister-in-law on my couch, eating my food and drinking my beer. "You have until Friday to find somewhere else to live," I said. "Both of you. Carmen, Derek, out by Friday." "You can't kick us out," Carmen said, her voice rising. "Bernice invited us. This is her house too." "Bernice doesn't own this house, I do. My name on the mortgage, my money paying it every month for 15 years. And you're not on any lease, which means you're guests who've overstayed their welcome. So you've got until Friday to pack your things and find somewhere else to live. Consider this your legal notice." "Eugene, you're being crazy," Bernice said, and she reached for my arm. I stepped back, and she flinched like I'd hit her. "Please, We need to talk about this. Not like this, not in front of everyone. I tried talking. For years. Nobody listened, so now I'm done talking. I'm acting. I walked to our bedroom, grabbed my overnight bag from the closet, and started packing. Bernice followed, still pleading, still making promises. I'd heard it before, years ago, during other fights that ended with me apologizing for being upset, for having needs, for existing in a way that inconvenienced anyone. Not this time. I packed enough clothes for a week, grabbed my toiletries from the bathroom, my laptop from the office, my important documents from the safe in the closet, birth certificate, passport, titles to vehicles, my mother's wedding ring that she'd left me, the coin collection my father had given me before he died. Things that were mine, that had always been mine, that I'd never thought to protect before. Bernice watched, crying now, mascara running down her face in dark streaks. Where are you going? Motel 6 on Highway 290. I'll text you the address for the divorce papers. Eugene, please. I love you. I stopped at the door and looked back at her. Really looked at her. The woman I'd married at 25, who'd promised to build a life with me, to be partners, to face the world together. Who'd slowly, piece by piece, year by year, turned me into a wallet with legs, an ATM with a heartbeat. No, you don't, I said. You love what I provide. There's a difference. And it took me 25 years to figure that out. I walked out of my house, got in my truck, and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I could see Bernice standing in the driveway, Carmen beside her, both of them watching me leave. Derek was on his phone, probably calling someone, probably already spinning this to make me the villain. I didn't look back, didn't slow down, just drove to the motel, checked in, and sat on the bed in a room that smelled like cigarettes and bleach. For the first time in 25 years, I felt like I could breathe. The motel room became my headquarters. I'd paid for a week up front, and the clerk didn't ask questions when I said I might need longer. People came to motels to hide from something. He didn't care what I was hiding from as long as I paid cash and didn't cause trouble. I sat on the bed and called Salvador. Dad? What's up? His voice was casual, distracted. I could hear traffic in the background, probably driving between showings. I need to see you tomorrow, your office, 10 a.m. I've got a showing at 10. Can we do lunch? There's this great place downtown. No, 10 a.m. or I start filing legal claims to recover my investments. Silence. Then, what? You heard me. You owe me $43,000, Salvador. We're going to discuss repayment. Dad, those weren't loans, those were investments, yes, which means you owe me either the money or a return on investment. Given that every property deal you involved me in fell through or was a scam, I'm calling in the debt. See you at 10 tomorrow. I hung up before he could argue, before he could start the manipulation, the guilt trips, the promises that this time would be different. Franklin was easier. He didn't answer his phone. He never did. Probably screening calls from creditors. So I sent a text. You owe me $68,000. Payment plan meeting tomorrow, 2 p.m., Denny's on Main Street, or I pursue legal action. The response came back in 5 minutes. WTF, Dad? I replied, 2 p.m., be there or I file a civil suit Monday morning. Daman called me within 5 minutes of getting his text. Dad, what the hell is going on? Mom called me crying, saying you moved out. She said you're divorcing her. I am. What? Why? What happened? That's between your mother and me. What's between you and me is the $22,000 you owe me. Dad, I'm still paying off student loans. I can't afford to pay you back right now. You graduated 2 years ago. You're working at a marketing firm making $50,000 a year. Time to start paying your debts. This is insane. You're having some kind of breakdown. No, son. I'm having a breakthrough. See you tomorrow, 3 p.m., same Denny's. We'll work out a payment schedule that fits your budget. I'm not coming. Then I'll file a civil suit for the full amount, plus interest. Your choice. I hung up and lay back on the bed. My phone started ringing immediately. Bernice, Salvador, Franklin, even Margaret calling to tell me I was being unreasonable. I turned it off. For the first time in 25 years, I slept 8 hours straight. His office was in one of those strip mall real estate places, sandwiched between a nail salon that always smelled like chemicals and an insurance agency with faded posters in the window. Salvador met me in the parking lot looking nervous, his suit expensive but rumpled like he'd slept in it. Dad, can we talk in the car? I don't want my colleagues hearing this. It's embarrassing. Your colleagues should know you're a debtor. Might affect your credibility with clients. People don't want to buy houses from someone who doesn't pay their debts. His face went red. That's not fair. Those were investments. You said they were investments. Get in the truck. We sat in my truck, air conditioning blasting against the September heat that refused to quit. I pulled out a folder from my briefcase, one I'd assembled last night at the motel, using every receipt, every bank statement, every text message I'd saved over the years. $43,217, I said, opening the folder so he could see the spreadsheet I'd created. That's what you owe me. I've broken it down by transaction. The $15,000 for your real estate license and training. The $12,000 for your down payment on the car you wrecked 6 months later. The $8,000 for that house flip that turned out to be owned by someone else. The $5,000 for the condo deal that was a complete scam. The $3,000 for... Okay, I get it. Salvador ran his hands through his hair, and I noticed it was thinning. My oldest son already going bald. Dad, I can't pay that back right now. My commission checks are good, but I've got expenses. I've got rent, car payment, insurance, and Jessica wants to get married soon. I'm trying to save for a ring. Then we'll set up a payment plan. $500 a month. $500. Dad, that's... At $500 a month, you'll have it paid off in just over 7 years. That's generous. A bank would charge interest. I'm giving you an interest-free loan repayment plan. I can't afford $500 a month. I looked at him. My oldest son wearing a suit that cost more than I made in a week, driving a BMW that probably cost more than my truck was worth, taking clients to expensive restaurants and charging it to his business account. You took Jessica to Cancun last month. That was a work trip. Your Instagram says otherwise. 4 days at an all-inclusive resort, parasailing, jet skis, expensive dinners. You posted 17 photos. None of them showed any clients or business meetings. His jaw clenched. You're stalking my social media now? I'm doing research on someone who owes me money. You can afford $500 a month. Or I can file a civil suit and garnish your real estate commissions directly. Your choice. We sat in silence for a long minute. Outside, people walked past carrying coffee, going about their normal days, not knowing they were walking past. A father and son having the conversation that would define their relationship for the rest of their lives. Finally, Salvador nodded. Fine. $500 a month. Can I write you a check? Cash. Every first of the month. You can Venmo it if that's easier, but I want confirmation of payment. Miss a payment, and I file suit immediately. No warnings, no second chances. He got out of the truck without another word. I watched him walk into his office, shoulders slumped, and felt nothing. No guilt, no satisfaction. Just empty. Just tired. Franklin didn't show up for his 2 p.m. meeting. I sat in Denny's for 30 minutes, ordered a coffee I didn't drink, and waited. At 2:15, I paid for the coffee, left a tip, and drove to his apartment. His apartment complex was the kind that looked good in photos, but fell apart when you looked closer. Cracked concrete, weeds growing through the parking lot, trash overflowing from dumpsters that never seemed to get emptied. Franklin's car was in the lot, a Dodge Charger with a cracked windshield and expired registration tags held together with duct tape. I knocked on our door. No answer. Knocked again. Harder. Finally, he opened it, shirtless, eyes shot, reeking of alcohol and something else I didn't want to identify. "Dad, what the hell?" "You missed our meeting." "I overslept. It's not a big deal." $68,000 is a big deal." He laughed, but it was bitter, ugly. "You're really doing this? You're really going to squeeze your own kids for money? What kind of father does that?" "The kind whose son owes him $68,000 and won't even show up to discuss repayment." "I don't have it, Dad. I'm barely making rent. I work at Target, for Christ's sake. I'm 30 years old stocking shelves for $13 an hour. Where am I supposed to get $68,000? "You found $68,000 when you needed it for gambling and lawyers. Find it again." That was different. That was survival. So is this. Come on, we're going to the bank. "I'm not going anywhere." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Franklin Eugene Wilson, you owe me $68,000 from multiple loans made between 2018 and 2024. I have documentation of every transaction. I'm giving you one chance to set up a voluntary repayment plan before I pursue legal action. Do you acknowledge this debt?" His face went from red to white. "You're recording me? Answer the question. This is blackmail." "No, this is documentation. Answer the question, or I'm filing a civil suit Monday morning with this video as evidence that you refused to negotiate in good faith." He stared at me, and I could see him calculating. See him trying to figure out if I was bluffing. If this was just another empty threat from the father he'd learned to ignore years ago. "Fine," he said finally. "I acknowledge the debt. Happy? We're going to set up an automatic payment plan. $300 a month. I can't afford $300. Then get a second job. You're 30 years old with no wife, no kids, no responsibilities except yourself. Get a second job, cut back on spending, and pay your debts." 20 minutes later, we were at his bank, setting up an automatic transfer. The teller looked uncomfortable, probably sensing the tension between us, but she processed the paperwork. $300 a month, automatically withdrawn every first of the month, deposited directly into my account. Franklin was shaking the whole time, whether from withdrawal or rage, I couldn't tell. As we left the bank, he grabbed my arm. "You're a bastard," he said, squeezing hard enough to hurt. "You know that? A complete bastard." I pulled my arm away. "I'm a father who's done enabling his son's self-destruction. Get help, Franklin. You need it." I drove away and left him standing in the parking lot, alone. Dahman was different. He showed up on time to Denny's, dressed professionally in slacks and a button-down shirt, and came with a proposal written out on actual paper, typed and formatted. "I can do $250 a month?" he said, sliding the paper across the table. "It'll take a while, but I'll pay you back every cent." I did the math, accounted for my rent and expenses, even built in a buffer for emergencies. At $250 a month, I'll have it paid off in 7 years and 4 months. I looked at the paper. He'd actually done the work, created a budget, shown me how he'd cut back on expenses to make room for the payments. My youngest, the one I'd always thought was just coasting, actually taking responsibility. "250 works," I said. "Dad, can I ask you something?" He looked younger suddenly, vulnerable. "Are you really divorcing Mom?" "Yes." "Because of what happened at your birthday?" "Because of what's been happening for 25 years. Your mother and I, we stopped being partners a long time ago. I just finally admitted it. He nodded slowly, stirring his coffee without drinking it. She's been calling me nonstop. She wants me to talk to you, convince you to come home. She says you're being irrational, that you'll regret this. What do you want, Daman? He looked up at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. I want you to be happy, Dad, even if that means without Mom. I've watched you for years, just fading, like you were disappearing a little bit every day. I should have said something. I'm sorry I didn't. Something in my chest loosened, just a fraction, just enough to let me breathe a little deeper. Thank you, son. That means more than you know. Can I ask why you're doing this with the money? I get it with Salvador and Franklin, they've been using you for years, but why me? I was going to pay you back anyway. Because making it official means you won't forget. Because having it in writing, having it automatic, means you're taking responsibility. And because I need to know that at least one of my sons understands that money doesn't just appear, it's earned, it's worked for. And when you borrow it, you pay it back. He nodded and pulled out his phone. Let me set up the transfer right now. First payment hits October 1st, right? Right. We finished our coffee in silence, but it was a different kind of silence. Not uncomfortable, just two men who'd said what needed saying and didn't need to fill the air with noise. As we left, Daman hugged me. Quick and awkward, but real. Love you, Dad. Love you too, son. I sat in my truck and cried for the first time since this all started. Not sad tears exactly. Just release, just exhaustion catching up to me. Friday came slower than I expected. I'd spent the week working, meeting with Richard to file the actual divorce paperwork, and avoiding everyone's calls. Bernice had called 43 times. Carmen, 16. Salvador, 12. Even Margaret had called twice, probably at Bernice's request, to tell me I was making a huge mistake. I didn't answer any of them. Friday morning, I drove to my house at 9 a.m., gave Carmen and Derek until noon to be gone, sent them both texts with the end. Bernice's car wasn't in the driveway. She was at the gym, probably, or at Linda's house crying about her terrible husband who'd abandoned her for no reason. Carmen answered the door in pajamas, looking exhausted. We need more time. We've been looking for places, but everything's so expensive. You've had 6 months of free rent to save money. That's more than enough time. Derek appeared behind her, shirtless as usual, looking like he'd just woken up. Man, you're really being a dick about this. It's like you want us to be homeless. I want you out of my house. What you do after that is your problem, not mine. This is Carmen's sister's house, too. You can't just kick out family. It's my house. Bernice lives here by marriage, which is ending. You live here by nothing. You're trespassing at this point. Noon. That's it. I drove away, went to Denny's for breakfast. It had become my routine over the past week, and gave them 3 hours. Long enough to pack, not long enough to make excuses. At noon exactly, I drove back. Their stuff was piled in the driveway. Trash bags mostly, cardboard boxes that looked like they'd been taken from behind grocery stores, a few pieces of furniture that I knew they'd bought at Goodwill. Carmen's car was loaded up, packed so full I could see bags pressing against the windows. But Derek's motorcycle was still in the garage. I walked in through the front door. Derek was in the kitchen, eating a sandwich, taking his time, making a point. When he saw me, he didn't even look up. Thought I told you noon. Relax, man. I'm almost done packing. Just grabbing some food for the road. He took another bite, chewed slowly, deliberately. Carmen's pretty upset, you know. She's been crying all morning, her own sister's husband kicking her out like she's nothing. You're done now. Get out. He stood up, leaving the sandwich on the counter, and puffed out his chest. The tough guy routine he probably learned from movies. Or what? I pulled out my phone and opened it to 911, showed him the screen. Or I call the police and have you removed for trespassing. Your choice. You've got 30 seconds. You're bluffing. You wouldn't really call the cops on family. I hit the call button. Let it ring once. The 911 operator answered. 911. What's your emergency? Derek's face changed, went from cocky to panicked. All right. Jesus. Hang up. We're going. I hung up and looked at the operator's number on my screen. Thank you, but false alarm. Everything's fine. Derek grabbed his jacket off the chair and headed for the door, but I stepped in front of him. Your motorcycle stays. That's my bike. That you've been storing in my garage without permission for 6 months. It stays until you arrange to transport it. You've got 1 week, then I'm selling it for storage fees. His jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. That bike's worth $8,000. Then you better figure out how to move it in the next 7 days. Rent a trailer, get a friend with a truck, I don't care. But if it's still here next Friday, I'm selling it to cover the storage fees you owe me for 6 months. Carmen appeared in the doorway, crying, mascara running. Eugene, please. This isn't like you. What happened to you? I woke up. That's what happened. They left. I watched them drive away, Carmen's car struggling under the weight, Derek staring at me through the passenger window with pure hatred. Then I went to the garage, looked at his motorcycle, a Harley knockoff with custom flame paint that probably cost more than he'd earned in the last year, and called a locksmith. By 4 p.m., I had new locks on every door. The locksmith, a guy named Pete, who'd been doing this for 30 years, didn't ask questions, just did the work, took my cash, and left. Bernice came home at 6, tried her key, couldn't get in. She knocked on the door and I opened it but stood in the doorway. What did you do? Changed the locks. Your new key's on the kitchen counter. You can come in and get it. This is my house too, Eugene. According to Texas law, yes. But according to reality, you're living in my house until the divorce is finalized. New rules now. You want to live here, you follow my rules. Her face twisted into something ugly. You've lost your mind. You've completely lost your mind. The girls were right about you. You're nothing. A sad little man having a sad little tantrum because he can't handle a joke. Maybe, I said, but this sad little man is taking his life back, and you're not invited anymore. She pushed past me, grabbed the keys from the counter where I left them, and turned on me. I'm calling my lawyer. You can't lock me out of my own house. That's illegal. I didn't lock you out. I gave you new keys. Big difference. And call whoever you want. My lawyer's expecting it. She went to the bedroom, slammed the door hard enough to rattle the pictures on the wall. I heard her on the phone, voice rising and falling in angry waves. I didn't care. Just sat on the couch, my couch, in my house, and watched TV for the first time in a week. It felt good to be home. A week passed, then another. The divorce machinery ground forward slowly, paperwork and motions and responses. Bernice had hired her own lawyer, some woman named Patricia, who apparently specialized in protecting women from financial abuse. According to Richard, Patricia was known for being aggressive and expensive. She's going to try to paint you as controlling, Richard said during one of our meetings. The money transfers, the locks, kicking out her sister, she'll use all of it to argue you're financially abusive and manipulative. Can she win with that? Not in Texas. Community property is community property. But she can make it expensive and ugly, drag it out, rack up legal fees, try to force you to settle for less just to make it stop. I'm not settling. Good. Because you shouldn't have to. Harold told me I looked different. Not thinner, though I had lost maybe 10 pounds from stress and eating less. More like I looked lighter, he said, less weighed down. Like someone had taken a weight off my shoulders I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. "You eating enough?" he asked over lunch at our usual diner. "Enough?" "Don't be a hero about it. Divorce is hard. You need to take care of yourself." "I'm fine, Harold. Better than I've been in years." He studied me over his burger, and I could see him trying to figure out if I was lying. Finally, he nodded. "Bernice called Sheila last night, said you've had a psychotic break, that you're threatening everyone, stealing money, destroying the family." "What did Sheila say?" "That she'd talk to me about it. So I'm talking to you about it. You having a psychotic break, Jean?" I moved money that was already mine, stopped funding everyone else's lifestyle, and set boundaries with people who've been taking advantage of me for years. If that's psychotic, the whole country needs therapy. Harold nodded slowly, took another bite of his burger. "Sheila wants me to try to talk some sense into you. Get you to reconsider, work it out with Bernice, keep the family together." "You going to?" "Hell no. I've watched you get walked on for 25 years, Jean. About time you stood up. I'm just sorry it took this long." We finished lunch in comfortable silence. Harold paid his turn, and as we walked to our trucks, he clapped me on the shoulder. "You need anything, you call me. I mean it. Middle of the night, doesn't matter, you call." "Thanks, Harold." That afternoon, I made a decision. I drove to Planet Fitness, the gym where Bernice spent 2 hours every morning. I'd never been inside, but I'd paid for her membership for 6 years, plus the personal training sessions with Brett, the muscle-bound 28-year-old. The girl at the desk looked bored, probably a college student working for minimum wage and free gym access. "Here for a tour?" "I'm looking for someone, Derek Patterson." "Can't give out member information, sir." I pulled out my phone, showed her Derek's Facebook profile picture. "My son-in-law, tall, tattoos, usually wearing tank tops. I need to talk to him about a family emergency." She looked uncertain. "I don't know if I've seen him." "He's usually here around 3, spotting people on the bench press. Acts like he works here, but he doesn't." Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition. "Oh, that guy. Yeah, he's here, usually by the free weights." I walked past her before she could stop me, through the turnstile into the main gym area. Rows of treadmills, weight machines, people in spandex and tank tops working on their bodies with the dedication of people who had nothing better to do with their afternoons. And there, by the free weights, was Derek. He was spotting some guy on bench press wearing a tight tank top that showed off his tattoos, laughing about something. I walked up and tapped his shoulder. He turned, and his face went from confused to angry in a second flat. "The hell are you doing here? Your motorcycle's getting sold tomorrow if you don't pick it up. Final warning. I'll get it when I get it." "No, you'll get it today, or it's gone. I've got a buyer offering $1,500. Cash. Figured I should give you one last chance, since apparently you've been telling people I stole your bike." His face went red, that quick anger that comes from being called out in public. "You can't sell my bike. That's theft. It's on my property. You were given multiple notices. Storage fees apply. Texas law is very clear about this. You abandon property on someone's land, they can sell it to cover costs." He stepped closer, trying to loom over me, trying to intimidate me with size and muscles and tattoos. The guy on the bench press sat up, watching. A few other gym-goers had stopped to stare, probably hoping for drama. "You're really pushing this, old man, and you're really freeloading. What's it going to be? Get your bike today or I sell it tomorrow." He glanced around, realized people were watching, and his tough guy routine cracked just a little. "Fine. I'll come get it tonight. 6 p.m., you're late, the buyer gets it." I walked away. Behind me, I heard Derek say something to his friend, heard laughter, probably calling me names, probably talking about what he'd like to do to me. I didn't care. I'd made my point. At 6 p.m. exactly, Derek showed up with a trailer hitched to a beat-up Ford truck and a friend who looked like his twin. Same tattoos, same tank top, same tough guy attitude. They loaded the motorcycle without speaking to me, moving with angry efficiency. As they were pulling away, Derek rolled down his window. "You're going to regret this. You know that? Everything you've done, everything you're doing to this family, you're going to regret it." I stood in my driveway, watching them leave. "Probably," I said, though I knew he couldn't hear me. "But not today." Richard called 3 weeks after I'd filed. The divorce papers were ready for Bernice to be served. All I had to do was sign off on the service method and arrange for her to receive them. "You want to do this in person or through a process server?" "Process server. At the house. Make it official." He sighed, and I could hear the judgment in it. "You sure? Doing it this way, it's very public, very final. It's a statement." "That's the point. Eugene, I've seen a lot of divorces. The ones that go smoothest are the ones where both parties try to minimize the drama. Serving her at home, where neighbors might see, where her friends might find out. That's going to make her angry. Angrier than she already is. She's the one who made our marriage public entertainment. Told her friends about our life for laughs. Seems only fair the divorce is public too." Another sigh. "Your money, your choice. I'll arrange it for Thursday morning." The server showed up Thursday at 10 a.m., while Bernice was having coffee with Margaret on the back patio. I watched from my truck across the street, parked where I could see but wouldn't be obvious. The server was a woman, middle-aged, professional-looking, in slacks and a blazer. She walked up to the patio gate, opened it, and walked right up to their table. I couldn't hear what was said, but I could see it. Bernice looking confused, then opening the envelope, her face going white, then red. Margaret reaching for her, saying something, probably supportive platitudes about men being terrible. Bernice standing up, looking around like she was searching for me, like she knew I had to be watching. I ducked down in my truck, waited until they went back inside, then drove away. She called me 17 times that day, left voicemails that started angry and ended pleading. "How could you do this? We need to talk. You're making a huge mistake. Please, Eugene, please just call me back." I didn't answer. Didn't listen to all the voicemails, just deleted them and turned off my phone. Finally, at 9 p.m., she texted, "We need to talk face to face." I replied, "Talk to my lawyer." "Eugene, please. I know I messed up. Let me make it right. We can fix this." "Too late." "It's never too late. We have 25 years together. That has to mean something. You can't just throw away 25 years like it's nothing." I stared at that message for a long time. 25 years. A quarter-century of my life, tied to someone who'd slowly eroded my sense of self until I barely existed. Until I was just a function, just a provider, just someone who showed up and paid for things. "It meant everything," I typed back. "That's why this hurts so much, but it's done. We're done." She didn't respond after that. Not that night, anyway. Salvador showed up at my motel on Saturday morning, Franklin behind him. Damen wasn't with them. Smart kid, staying out of it. I was eating breakfast from the vending machine, sitting on my bed with bad coffee and stale donuts, when I heard the knock. I opened the door. Salvador looked angry. Franklin looked drunk, or high, or both. Neither looked like they wanted a pleasant conversation. "We need to talk," Salvador said, pushing past me into the room without being invited. "About what?" "About you ruining this family. About what you're doing to Mom. To all of us." I almost laughed. "I'm ruining it. Mom's a wreck. She cries every day. She's talking about selling the house because she can't afford it alone. Carmen's staying on friends' couches because you kicked her out with nowhere to go, and you're squeezing us for money like some mob loan shark. Like we're not your kids, just people who owe you money. You are people who owe me money. You're also my kids. Both things can be true. Franklin stepped forward, and I could smell whiskey on his breath even at 10 in the morning. His eyes were shot, unfocused. You're being a selfish prick, Dad. All those years you complained about being tired, about working too much. We needed you. We were your kids. You were supposed to help us. That's what fathers do. I did help you. For 30 years I helped you. I paid for everything, sacrificed everything, worked until the end so that you could have an easier life than I did. And what did I get? Mockery. Disrespect. Bills I couldn't pay because I was too busy paying yours. That's what parents do, Salvador said, his voice rising. They sacrifice for their kids. They put their kids first. That's literally the job description of being a parent. No, that's what I did. That's what doormats do, and I'm done being a doormat. Franklin lunged. I'd been half expecting it, had seen the rage building in his eyes, the way his fists were clenching and unclenching. He came at me wild and uncoordinated, arms swinging like he was in a bar fight instead of fighting his father. I sidestepped, and he stumbled into Salvador. They both crashed against the wall, knocked over the cheap motel lamp. Franklin came up swinging again, and I caught his wrist, twisted it just enough to hurt, but not damage. You're drunk at 10 a.m., I said quietly, holding his wrist while he struggled. You're 30 years old, drunk at 10 in the morning, and you want to fight your father because he's finally holding you accountable. That's what your life is now. You really want to blame me for that? He jerked away, stumbled back into Salvador, who pushed him off angrily. Jesus, Franklin, get it together. He's the one who— Shut up, Salvador said, then turned to me. This isn't over, Dad. Mom's lawyer says what you did with the money was illegal. Theft. You can't just empty bank accounts and lock her out of her own house. I didn't lock her out. She has keys. And the money was community property that I moved to prevent her from spending it all before the divorce is finalized. It's legal. Ask your mother's expensive lawyer. Salvador pulled Franklin toward the door. You're going to regret this. All of it. When you're old and alone and none of your kids want anything to do with you, you're going to regret it. Maybe, I said, but right now I regret the last 25 years more, so we'll call it even. They left, Franklin giving me the finger through the window as Salvador's BMW pulled out of the parking lot. I sat on the bed, shaking, not from fear or adrenaline, but from the weight of it all. My sons, the boys I'd raised, coached in Little League, taught to ride bikes, helped with homework. They hated me now. I'd expected it. Richard had warned me. Even Harold had said the kids would side with Bernice because that's what kids do in divorce. Side with the parent who doesn't hold them accountable. Didn't make it hurt less. The divorce took 4 months to finalize. 4 months of paperwork and lawyers and arguments over who got what. Bernice fought everything. The asset division, the debt allocation, the timeline, even the terms of separation. Richard was right. She fought dirty. She tried to claim I'd hidden money in offshore accounts. When that didn't work, she claimed I'd psychologically abused her for years, controlling her finances and isolating her from friends. When the judge asked for evidence, she couldn't provide any. Then she claimed I was having a breakdown, that I needed psychiatric evaluation before the divorce could proceed. The judge didn't care. Judge Martinez was 60, a woman who'd probably seen every divorce trick in the book twice. She listened to Bernice's lawyer present tearful arguments about financial abuse and emotional manipulation. Then she looked at the bank statements and saw 25 years of me working while Bernice spent. Community property is community property. Judge Martinez said, sounding bored. You each get half of the marital assets and half of the marital debts. Mrs. Wilson, you're not entitled to alimony because Texas doesn't have permanent alimony, only temporary spousal maintenance. And you don't meet the qualifications. Mr. Wilson has no obligation to continue supporting you financially after this divorce is finalized. Do you understand? Bernice's lawyer tried to argue, but Judge Martinez cut her off. This isn't a negotiation. This is Texas law. Split the assets, split the debts, move on with your lives. In the end, Bernice got half of what was left after the debts were paid, which, after I'd cleared out the credit cards and paid off my truck, was about $40,000. She also got half the equity in the house, which we'd have to sell to split. I got my freedom, my truck, my tools, and my sanity. Salvador paid his $500 every month like clockwork, though he never called, never texted, never acknowledged me beyond the Venmo transfers. Franklin missed 3 payments in the first 6 months, then stopped paying entirely. I filed the civil suit like I'd promised, got a judgment, started garnishing his wages. He called me once, drunk and crying, asking why I hated him. I didn't have an answer that would satisfy him. Dahman never missed a payment. Not once. He called every few weeks, usually just to check in, see how I was doing. We'd talk about work, about life, about nothing important. But he called. That meant something. The house sold in March for $60,000 more than we'd paid for it 15 years ago. Real estate boom, the agent said. Lucky timing. Bernice got her half of the proceeds, about $75,000 after fees and paying off the remaining mortgage. I got the same amount, deposited it into savings, and moved into a small apartment near work. 1 bedroom, clean, quiet, cheap. I bought furniture from IKEA, hung pictures I actually liked instead of the ones Bernice had picked, set up my apartment exactly how I wanted it. No one to tell me the couch was the wrong color or the TV was too big or I was wasting money on stupid things. It was mine. Finally. Completely mine. 18 months after that birthday party, I ran into Bernice at the grocery store. Pure coincidence. I was shopping after work. She was there with Carmen, both of them pushing carts through the frozen food section. We saw each other at the same time. For a second, nobody moved, everybody just frozen like the food around us. Then, Carmen grabbed Bernice's arm, whispered something, probably suggesting they leave. But Bernice stayed. She looked older, not dramatically, but noticeably. Her hair had more gray, which she hadn't bothered to color. Her gym-toned body was softer, less maintained. The confidence that had always radiated from her, that certainty that she was the center of attention, it was muted now. "Eugene?" she said, and her voice was quieter than I remembered. "How are you?" "Good. You?" "Managing." She glanced at Carmen, who was studying the frozen vegetables with intense focus. "Carmen and I got a place together. It's small, 2 bedrooms, but it works. We split rent and expenses." I nodded, didn't know what to say. Carmen looked like she'd lost weight, looked tired in a way that suggested things weren't going well. I didn't ask. "I'm sorry," Bernice said suddenly, "for how things ended, for the things I said at your party, for everything." "Me too." "Are you happy?" The question surprised me. I thought about it, really thought about it. My small apartment, my quiet evenings, my weekends without drama or demands or people needing things from me. Harold and I had taken up fishing, went most Saturdays to a lake an hour outside the city, sat in comfortable silence, catching nothing but enjoying the peace. I'd started reading again, books I'd meant to read for 20 years, but never had time for. I'd taken a vacation, my first real vacation in a decade, drove up to Colorado and hiked in the mountains for a week by myself. I wasn't rich, I wasn't remarried. I didn't have some new, better life to show off. But I also wasn't working 70 hours a week to pay for other people's mistakes. Wasn't coming home to mockery and demands. Wasn't lying awake at night wondering when it would finally be too much. I'm content, I said. That's enough. She smiled, but it was sad, weighted with regret and recognition. I never meant to make you feel invisible. I didn't realize I was doing it until you were gone. My therapist says I have issues with appreciation, with acknowledging the labor people do for me. Apparently it's a pattern. I know. I believe you. But that doesn't change what happened. Do you ever think about... She started, then stopped. Never mind. That's not fair to ask. No, I said, answering the question she didn't finish. That part of my life is over. She nodded, and I could see tears starting, mascara threatening to run like it had that night I left. Take care of yourself, Eugene. You too, Bernice. I walked away, finished my shopping, drove home to my small apartment. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple and red, the kind of sunset you only get in Texas. I made dinner, pasta with chicken and vegetables, nothing fancy but good, and ate it at my small table, looking out the window at the city below. Salvador had paid off $18,000 of his debt. 3 years down, 4 to go. Daman was almost done, would make his final payment in 2 months, had already texted me asking if we could celebrate with dinner when he did. Franklin had declared bankruptcy, which cleared his debts, but destroyed his credit. I'd gotten about $12,000 from the garnishment before his bankruptcy made the rest uncollectible. The money didn't matter anymore. The principal did. My sons would be fine, eventually, or they wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my job to fix them anymore. Wasn't my responsibility to sacrifice my life to make theirs easier. They were adults. They'd figure it out, or they wouldn't. But they'd do it without using me as a crutch. I washed my dish, turned off the lights, and sat on my couch in the growing dark. Tomorrow I'd work, maybe grab lunch with Harold, come home to my quiet apartment and read or watch TV or just sit in the silence. The same routine, day after day, week after week. And I was okay with that. More than okay. I'd spent 50 years being what everyone else needed me to be. A husband, a father, a provider, a wallet with legs, a solution to other people's problems, invisible unless someone needed something. Now, I was just Eugene Wilson, 52 years old, divorced, living in a one-bedroom apartment, eating dinner alone more often than not. Not the life I'd imagined at 25 when I married Bernice and thought we'd grow old together. But it was my life now, my choice, my peace, and that was enough.